Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. We are technical issues streaming to the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page today. So we are going to get started and we will post the recording to social media. So good afternoon. Thank you again for joining for our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to rising gun violence. This is for press only. If you're not a member of the press, like I said, you can watch today's live stream later on the city's accounts. We also are streaming on 900 AM WURD. Mayor Kenny, we will begin with you. You have the floor.
Thanks, Dean, and good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. Our Philadelphia Police Department and Office of Criminal Justice and Public Safety are working hard to make our streets safer for all Philadelphians. Today, we want to call attention to a very important issue that threatens the health and well-being of far too many Philadelphians, and that's domestic violence. The last briefing on April 28th, Deputy Commissioner Dale shared that domestic violence homicides were up 100% compared to this very time last year, 100%. And 2 weeks later, that stat is even worse. So today we have invited Azucena Ugarte, Director of our Office of Domestic Violence Strategies, as well as Chief Inspector Altabis Love Craighead, to share more on our work related to addressing domestic violence and resources that are available. We also have Chief Inspectors Michael McCarrick and Frank Venor to share the statistics and case information normally provided by Deputy Commissioners Nash and Dales, who are currently participating in City Council's budget hearings. Before I turn it over to Azucena, I also want to use this briefing as an opportunity to highlight upcoming community events that play a key role in reducing gun violence. First, the State Representative Donna Bullock's Pedal for Peace bike ride this Sunday from 9 a.m. to noon. It kicks off at 33rd and Diamond Street. And we know that our streets are safer with fewer guns out there. It's why we are supporting two Save a Life gun buyback events taking place next Saturday, May 22nd. One will be at the Bethel Temple Community Bible Church at 228 East Allegheny Avenue. The other will be at West Kensington Ministry at 21-40 North Hancock Street. Both will be open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and you can get a $100 gift card to ShopRite when you turn in a gun. Find out more about these events and more on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Just search Philly Alive 215. Dina will also provide a link in the chat with the event flyers and the presentation of our speakers. Now I'll turn it over to Azucena Ugarte.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. My name is Azucena Ugarte, and I am the Director of the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies. The Office of Domestic Violence Strategies was created by Mayor Kenny's administration in October 2016 with the purpose of supporting cities' departments in their efforts to respond to intimate partner violence. As part of our work, all new child welfare workers are now trained in intimate partner violence and receive ongoing assistance with cases that involve domestic violence. We have also developed and implemented training plans for all staff and providers from the Department of Behavioral Health and from the Office of Homeless Services. As we sadly already know, domestic violence is complex, dangerous, and lethal. It could affect anyone regardless of economic status, ethnicity or race, sexual orientation, gender identity, or immigration status. If you are in an abusive relationship or know someone who is, these are useful resources. If you want to talk to a DV advocate about the situation, options, and planning for your safety and the safety of your children, you can call the Philadelphia Domestic Violence Hotline at 866-723-3014. I'm going to repeat that number. It's 866-723-3014. This is a 24-hour hotline, and it is completely confidential. The Domestic Violence Hotline uses language line for interpretation services if needed. If you would like to talk to someone about your legal options, or if you need legal advice related to domestic violence, you can call the Women Against Abuse Legal Center during business hours. The number is 215-686-7082. You would have to leave a message and a safe number for an advocate to call you back. If you want to file for a protection from abuse order or PFA during business hours, you have the option to do it by email or by phone. If you prefer to file a PFA by phone, you will have to call the Family Court Domestic Violence Unit at 215-686-6311, extension 19217. Staff at the Domestic Violence Unit could provide you with information about filing PFAs from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. But if you would like to have a PFA issued that same day, you would need to call before noon. If you prefer to file a PFA by email, you can download the form from the Family Court website. I think you can see the link in the slide, and then email the pre-prepared order to tempPFA@court.fila.gov. If you need to file for a PFA and cannot wait until the next business day, this means if you need to file for a PFA and it's after 5 p.m. and before 8 a.m. of the next business day, you can file an emergency order at the Emergency Filing Unit in room B03, that is the basement, of the Stout Center. The Stout Center is also known as the Criminal Justice Center, or CJC, and it is located at 13th and Filbert Streets. Please share these resources with everyone you think could need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Azucena. Now we're going to turn it over to Chief Inspector Altavis Love Craighead with the Philadelphia Police Department.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Chief Inspector Altavis Love Craighead, Commanding Officer of the Community Relations Bureau. In 2020, there were a total of 18 domestic homicides in Philadelphia. So far this year, we've had 19 domestic homicides in the city. As you can see, we have already tragically surpassed last year's numbers. On this date last year, we had 8 homicides. 8 compared to our 18 this year. That's a 138% increase over last year. 1 is too many, and the numbers continue to trend in the wrong direction. What the data has shown is there is a strong relationship between the shutdown and increased violence. This is a problem that is being experienced in many major cities throughout the country, not just our own. Although this problem isn't unique to Philadelphia, it doesn't mean that it should be accepted or normalized. When the shutdown occurred, many of the safe havens that were available to people were taken away. Schools were shut down, churches could not open their doors, and workplaces were closed. People in our communities that worked as buffers to domestic violence were simply not around to spot danger. In some instances, individuals were left in residences with the very people who assault or abuse them. Because the Philadelphia Police Department was concerned with the number of violent incidents in 2020, we wanted to take a more proactive stance in educating and providing resources to the public regarding some of the issues surrounding domestic violence. This March, the Philadelphia Police Department hosted a domestic violence webinar series aimed at sharing information on police and domestic violence agencies, procedures, and resources. The webinar covered various topics from the dynamics of interpersonal violence, police response to domestic incidents, court procedures, and safety planning. The seminar was very successful and was viewed over 21,000 times. I want to personally thank the Lutheran Settlement House, WAR, Philadelphia Center Against Sexual Violence, Cordelia, and the District Attorney's Office, who presented throughout the series with the Philadelphia Police Department. This exchange of information was extremely helpful for participants, and I received a lot of positive feedback after each session. Our work did not stop with the March webinars. We have continued to work with the community agencies to improve the Philadelphia Police Department's response to domestic violence incidents. We partnered with Women Against Abuse to institute a series of training sessions for detectives and frontline supervisors. This training consists of skill building around the dynamics of domestic violence, the effects of trauma, police responses to domestic violence and sexual assault. The training will strengthen the department's response to domestic violence and sexual assault by focusing on best practices in investigating these cases. The training will also focus on the Philadelphia Police Department's policies and procedures. I'm asking individuals who are experiencing domestic violence or know someone who is to please visit our website at www.phillypolice.com. Go to the Programs and Services tab and then click on the Victim and Assistance Programs link. There you will find resources for domestic violence, including the Domestic Violence Hotline and information that was covered during our webinar series. Our webinar series was an excellent way for the Philadelphia Police Department to share information with other agencies and the communities we serve. Community engagement is a crucial component to successful community policing. Unfortunately, COVID has put a lot of restrictions on how we can engage with our community, but one way that we continue to do so is through virtual platforms. We are particularly cognizant of these needs, especially when it comes to engaging with our youth who may be at an increased risk for victimization or engaging in dangerous behaviors. As the city reopens and more activities become available, we want to make sure that we are providing safe spaces for youth to engage with adults and each other. The Philadelphia Police Department has created the Youth Advisory Commission so that officers and youth can work hand in hand to create positive change in our communities. The Youth Advisory Commission is open to all youth ages 14 to 18. Please apply at our website, phillypolice.com. Tonight at 4 p.m., the Philadelphia Police Department will be holding an anti-bullying and conflict resolution Zoom meeting. I encourage our youth to attend, voice your concerns in the meeting, and help us develop creative solutions for combating this behavior. You can find the Zoom link on the Philadelphia Police Department's Twitter page and Facebook page. Keeping all residents and visitors safe is the core responsibility of our department. To that end, I will now introduce Chief Inspector Michael McCarrick, who will produce an update on the latest statistics and trends in our city. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chief Inspector Michael McCarrick from Regional Operations Command North. We filled in for Deputy Commissioner Dales, as the mayor pointed out. So, give you our weekly briefing. If you go to the next slide. Draw your attention as you see the logical, the progression of shootings from 2019 through 2021. You see the increase of 34% in overall homicides and also 41% in shooting victims. Which bears attention is the fact of if you look at the inside shootings, which really hamper law enforcement's ability to prevent these type shootings, stark increase not only in the inside homicide jobs, however, even just shooting victims, but an 89% increase. Below, we break down the motive for our homicide, and as pointed out by my counterpart, you see the significant increase in our domestic related shootings. If you look, we're pretty consistent with the motive of argument. They continue to drive our numbers, but our clearance rate at this point indicates 46% of our homicides, but that number does not take into consideration those jobs that active arrest warrants have been obtained because the individual has not been arrested yet. And Chief Veneur can explain that further. Next slide, please. So we broke down over the past 5 weeks to look at the shootings and the homicides. You'll see that we experienced 2 significant periods of homicides in the week of April 5th through the 11th and April 26th through May 2nd. Additionally, our shootings correlated with that, our criminal shootings. When you look over the past week, despite this past weekend, our numbers were trending downward, at least in regard to the shootings over this past week. Next slide. So we do a comparative of our citywide homicide rate and compare that to our Operation Pinpoint, our philosophy to target gun-related violence and problem locations, repeat problem locations. And you can see that citywide, our homicide rate has a 34% increase. However, in our focused areas, which is part of the mayor's safer neighborhoods, you'll see we're down by 9% in those focused areas. Next slide. So our shooting victims also follow that same model and correlate. You have a 41% increase in the overall shootings, and there is a minimal increase in shootings in regard to our Operation Pinpoint locations. Next slide. So this bears significance as you see the trend moving up in 2019, 2020, and 2021. VUFA is Uniform Firearms violations, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act. And as a result of last year, our numbers, we had a total of 2,300 plus 2,324 of individuals that were arrested where the primary offense was the illegally carrying of a firearm on the highway. As you can see this year already in just a short period of time, we have 1,111 jobs. That kind of, if you protract that out, it's over 3,000 arrests for just illegally carrying firearms on the highway. The proliferation of guns is severely is shown by this chart. Go to the next. And then finally, you'll see, as you can see, the number of firearms that are being recovered in the city. We were about 3,500 in 2017. Last year, we had almost 5,000 firearms that were taken off the streets of Philadelphia. If you look at 2021, we're at 2,200. That over the course of the year, we're projecting out over 6,000 firearms taken off the street involved in gun-related crime in the city of Philadelphia. Next. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Inspector Benor, who will address the investigation.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Benor. I'm the Chief of Detectives for the Philadelphia Police Department. I'm going to highlight a few investigations. A few of them are homicides. One's an illegal gun seizure, a major seizure that we undertook during this past week. The first case I want to talk about is one of those homicides that occurred over this very violent weekend. This particular homicide occurred in the 1700 block of West Ruscombe Street on Saturday, May 8th, just before 8 p.m. The decedent in this case is a Sebastian Brown, 20-year-old male. What we know now through our investigation is Mr. Brown was seated inside a Malibu. He was in the passenger side. Silver Malibu was parked on the street. When we know a Mitsubishi Outlander, Silver also pulls up to the location. 4 males exit that vehicle. They walk towards the Malibu. During the course of the interaction, one of those males assaults with a firearm the driver of the Malibu. He strikes him with the gun. The other individuals, then the passenger of the Malibu gets out. That's our decedent. And at least 2 of these individuals open fire on Sebastian Brown, and he's struck with gunfire. He later is pronounced at the hospital. What we're releasing today, which hasn't been released as of yet through the hard work of the homicide detectives, are images of the 4 males that we believe to be responsible for this murder. You're looking at them there, and we're going to ask the public's help in identifying these individuals. We also have images of the vehicle, the Outlander that pulled up. It has a very distinct black hood on top of the silver vehicle. Something that I wanted to mention for this incident and for one of the next incidents I have, in each and every homicide that we offer up the mayor offers up a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction. And we ask that any tips that you have be called into our tip line, 215-686-TIPS or 8477. That information will be directed to the homicide unit. We feel these images are pretty distinct of these individuals, and that you could very easily get them tips into the homicide unit. If you want to go to the next slide, I believe it has a shot of the vehicle. Vehicle was described as having a dark black hood with a paper tag on it. So anybody obviously that knows this vehicle, tinted windows, could also call that information into the tip line. The next investigation I want to outline is, and it goes right into play with the statistics that Chief McCarrick just outlined. During the course of this past year, we know we've recovered over 2,200 illegal guns off the street during the course of arrests that occurred between the uniform officers and investigators. Detectives are all a part of that. During this past week, we put together an operation and utilizing interviews, information received from the public, and some very innovative investigative techniques, we were able to establish probable cause and serve a series of search warrants in East Division, Northeast Division, and North Central Division in Philadelphia. And we had the help of U.S. Marshal's Service, our Attorney General's office, and many of the other units within the city. One of the things I want to highlight about this investigation is over the course of the week, we've recovered multiple weapons. But the four of the weapons recovered last week in this particular operation was a Glock 30, Model 30. It's a 45 caliber. It's also an AR-15 was recovered. Another 40 caliber weapon was recovered, and a 9mm. The next slide, if you want to take a look at these weapons, because I don't know in God's name what anybody would do with the capacity that these weapons held. But on the bottom picture, you could clearly see that two of these weapons had a barrel magazine connected to them. Those barrels hold 50 rounds of ammunition, plus whatever the magazine held. So a couple of these guns were able to fire up to 80 rounds. I have no idea what anyone, anywhere would need 80 rounds of ammunition to fire for, especially on the streets of our city. So these are the weapons that we're trying to take off the street. These are what the officers are facing each and every day when they do that. And this was a detective operation where search warrants were used. So it's a very dangerous situation, but we need to get each and every one of these off the street. This is another situation where you could use our tip line. If you know of someone who has illegal weapons and you want us to start an investigation like this, we'd be glad to look into it. Drop a message to our tip line, 686-TIPS. The last and final investigation is another homicide investigation. It is one of the 19 homicides which Chief Love Craighead spoke of earlier. It's a domestic related homicide. It goes back a little further to March 30th in Upper Darby. The mother of Diana Price, 21-year-old female, reported her missing in Upper Darby. She was last seen getting into her boyfriend's vehicle out there. They had an extensive investigation into her disappearance, and that investigation led them to seek the help of the Special Victims Unit here in the Philadelphia Police Department. Our involvement then led, and we utilized our FBI Violent Crime Task Force. That involvement led to the recovery of, unfortunately, tragically, of Miss Bryce's body in Southwest Philadelphia. The Homicide Division then took over the investigation, and they were able to put probable cause together for an arrest warrant for a Justin Smith, 23-year-old. We've been actively searching for him since then. We're asking anyone who has information into his whereabouts to contact our tip line or 911. You got to know that he's considered armed and dangerous. The individual has been on the run for some time, so we could really use your help. And of course, which also applies in this case, is there's a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of this individual. With that, I'll turn things back to Tina.
Thank you, Chief Inspector Venor. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 3 or fewer. Today, we limited topics to the first round to questions related to the presentations, but if there's time for a second round, we will open questions to other topics. We also have Armando available for Spanish language translation. So now if you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function under reactions. We will unmute your microphone when it's your turn. First up, we have Layla Jones with Billy Penn.
Hello, hi. My question is for one of the police representatives. I want to know if you all had any updates on the fatal shooting of a 20-year-old man at the 600 block of Green Street. The shooting was caught on video, and I understand there were a lot of witnesses in that area. They were calling it Northern Liberties.
I'll say there's an active investigation. I know we released some pictures, images that we had of the suspect we believe to be involved. There are also other witnesses that came forward. Right now, I know it's still active and there's been no one identified at this point.
Okay, Layla, you're good?
She's muted.
Okay, next up we have Argenis Figueroa with Univision.
Hello, good afternoon. I will need Armando. Translation, please.
Buenas tardes, Argenis.
Buenas tardes, Armando. Gracias. Armando, mi pregunta es tanto para el alcalde como algún representante de la policía. Quiero saber cuál es, estoy trabajando, digamos, en algo un poco más profundo y tiene que ver justamente con los desafíos que presenta la policía en este momento y que puede restar el que justamente le den respuesta a los residentes a sus demandas en materia de seguridad.
My question is for the mayor and for a representative of the police, and I'd like to know what are the challenges the police have now in order to respond to the citizens' complaints and concerns that would be impeding a response from the police.
Are you talking about gun violence or in general?
¿Te refieres específicamente a la violencia debido a las armas de fuego o en general?
No, en general, porque aquí lo que quiero mostrar es los desafíos que presentan, digamos, a nivel de presupuesto que justamente no les permiten darle respuesta a los residentes en materia de seguridad en general.
No, in general, and specifically, I would be referring to the challenges the police have in terms of budget constraints that impede a response to the citizens' concerns and complaints.
Well, I think in general, it's the hesitance of people coming forward with information. And that is a historical issue that's devolved over years between the community and its police force. And we need to continue to try to improve that relationship to the point where people in the neighborhoods trust talking to the police and giving them information. In the instance that Layla raised, there's a lot of people that come forward with information readily. In some neighborhoods that have historically had not a great relationship with the police department, they're not as forthcoming with the information. In addition, there's a concern that there are people who come forward with information are also in danger. So there's a hesitance. We have to continue to improve our relationship with our communities so that people trust the police and are willing to give them information on the people who are doing bad things in their communities.
Bueno,
If the police want to, after you're done translating, if any of the police representatives want to.
Primero, la respuesta del alcalde, Argenis. Obviamente hay una cierta reticencia para compartir información por parte de las comunidades que históricamente no han tenido una muy buena relación con la policía y estamos tratando de desarrollar estos vínculos de confianza para lograr que la gente pueda hablar y compartir información vital para poder protegerla. Hay gente que sí se ha presentado y comparte información, pero en algunos barrios no ha habido una muy buena relación con la policía y hay el temor de que por compartir información estén poniéndose en riesgo. Lo que nos queda a nosotros es mejorar esta relación, desarrollar vínculos de confianza para hacer que la gente pueda darles los instrumentos a la policía para poder protegerlos. Gracias. Y ahora nos va a dar una respuesta alguien del Departamento de Policía. Go ahead.
So, this is Chief Inspector McCarrick, and I'll handle one component to piggyback off of exactly what the mayor said. There's challenges that we face with the community, whether it be distrust, whether it be there's a fear of coming forward, cooperation. There's a culture of no snitching in certain areas of the community that it's deemed as being against your own community. So all these barriers have to be broken down. But the challenges that we're faced with right now, are reminiscent of in the past. We have an opioid crisis that's currently going on. There's a pandemic crisis that has driven issues in the way we engage in people and we engage with the public. So these all present unique challenges to us. You see the proliferation of guns that are out there as indicated by the slides. You can see that there's a significant number of guns that are out on the street, and conflict resolution skills kind of are lacking in certain communities. It wasn't available maybe. They kind of lead to resorting to that next level of violence that we didn't experience over the last decade.
Nos habla el jefe de la policía, el inspector McCarrick, y nos dice que él se aúna al mensaje que nos ha dado el alcalde, pero que hay retos adicionales, obviamente, que involucran la falta de confianza con la labor policial, el temor de cooperar y una cultura en la cual no hay que soplar o dar información por el peligro que se pueda experimentar. Y eso se da en ciertas áreas y, por supuesto, nuestra labor es tratar de derrumbar estas barreras y tratar de superar estos retos que hemos tenido desde el pasado, que se han empeorado con una crisis de los opioides, la pandemia, que también ha participado para empeorar esta situación, y nosotros tenemos que hacer que el público nos ayude a superar estos retos, que incluyen también la proliferación de las armas de fuego que están circulando. El número de armas que circula libremente es demasiado alto, la falta de recursos que puedan llevar a una resolución de conflictos y que llevan a escalar estas situaciones a una resolución violenta. Son labores que tenemos pendientes y que estamos haciendo, incorporando a la comunidad. Gracias.
Ok, gracias Armando. Mi segunda pregunta, quisiera saber cuántos oficiales en este momento están activos en el departamento de policía, y entendiendo que hay un déficit presupuestario allí, ¿qué gestiones están haciendo para mejorar las labores de patrullaje e incluso de la deserción de los mismos oficiales de policía?
My second question addresses the issue of police officers. And my concern is what is being done to achieve goals of the police, given some budgetary constraints. There is a deficit in the police budget, and what is being done in order to keep officers on the streets patrolling and addressing the issue of dropping out from the police force, abandonment of the police force.
I mean, we're in a situation right now where our command staff is and city council having conversations about the budget. So we don't know what the end result of that process will be. There have been requests that we continue to outfit, for example, officers with tasers. That, of course, cost money. There's been requests that we continue to expand the training for officers when it comes to community police relations, and also train officers when it comes to interacting with people in mental health crises. That all costs money, so we're going to work it out with council, and I think we should be okay. I am concerned about people dropping out of the profession or not wanting to enter the profession, and I think that's something that we need to continue to work on. And also, I think that even though council did vote for this, I think the pre-appointment residency requirement is going to be a problem going forward, because it doesn't allow us to have a Philadelphia address, a lease, or an apartment, a mortgage or an apartment a year before you apply to be a city employee, including the police. I think is not a good recruiting tool, and to enable us to go, out to military bases or to historic Black colleges and universities or to other colleges and universities and recruit in other states. That's not going to be possible now without a person coming in and having a year residency before they can become a police recruit. So those are challenges we're going to have to deal with, and we'll do our best to deal with them.
Obviamente nosotros tenemos una situación que nos plantea problemas, y por eso tenemos al liderazgo de la policía que está participando de conversaciones con los miembros del Consejo Municipal para tratar de resolver estos temas presupuestarios. Por ejemplo, se ha mencionado la idea de que se equipe a los oficiales de policía con tasers, pero eso obviamente cuesta dinero, que se expanda la capacitación que se les da a los oficiales, y eso también cuesta dinero. Y obviamente tenemos que mejorar la relación entre la policía y las comunidades que sirven. También resolver los temas de salud mental que empeoran estas situaciones, pero eso también involucra un dinero. Por lo tanto, en otro lado, tenemos que ver la deserción de los policías de la Academia de la Policía, y también aquellos que no se encuentran muy motivados para ingresar y solicitar ingreso. Vamos a trabajar también con el Consejo Municipal, porque tenemos en estos momentos un requisito de residencia en la ciudad para siquiera postularse a la Academia de la Policía, que es un requisito de 1 año. Entonces, estas personas potencialmente pudieran ingresar a la Academia de Policía, pero tienen que haber vivido un año ya en la ciudad antes de solicitarlo. Esto no es nada bueno y vamos a tratar de trabajar tal vez viendo si es que hay reclutas potenciales en las universidades, en las bases militares, pero nuevamente vamos a conversar con los miembros del Consejo Municipal para ver si este requisito de residencia, que está válido para todos los potenciales empleados, pudiera reducirse. Gracias.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Armando. Quería saber si el representante de la policía tenía el número de oficiales activos en este momento.
Chief McCarrick, do you have the number of active police officers available to share at this time?
That number, I believe, was I do not have it. That could be furnished by public affairs.
We can get back to them. We have numbers of police that are on injured reserve or injured on duty. We have people who are active but aren't maybe out on the street on a regular daily basis. So we'll get that number back to Argenis.
Argenis, en este momento no podemos compartir estas cifras. Tenemos una serie de oficiales que están lesionados o que están en la calle, que están activos, pero más adelante podemos pasarte esos datos. Gracias.
Gracias a ustedes. Feliz tarde.
Thanks to everyone.
Okay, next up we have Saj Purple Blackwell.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my first question is, I guess, for one of the police on the call. Do we yet have a follow-up from the shooting on between 52nd Street, between 52nd and 1st and 51st and Irving? There are rumors that the gentleman was initially shot and had lived, but there are now rumors that he has passed away. So we want to know if there's an update in regards to that, would be question one. And then a follow-up question would be, with this very deadly Mother's Day that we had over the Mother's Day weekend in the city of Philadelphia, are we yet getting closer to thinking about a citywide emergency for gun violence and, with creating curfews and possibly increasing stop and frisk? And then what are the stop and frisk numbers as of today?
Well, let me deal with the issue of this weekend. I mean, not only in the city of Philadelphia, but CNN reported over 72 hours over the past weekend, there were 400 shootings nationwide. 100 homicides and 300, non-fatal shootings. And it's not only in Chicago and Philadelphia and larger cities, it's in Boulder, Colorado and smaller towns across the country. This is a national health and safety crisis. And the attention that's needed to this is the same attention that was needed for the pandemic. And until we take seriously as a nation, the fact that the availability of guns, and especially guns like Chief Inspector McCarrick showed us, that we're going to continue to struggle with this. Philadelphia Police Department is doing everything that it can and more, and then some, to get illegal guns off the street. As you can see, we've confiscated twice as many as we had the year before, but they keep on getting replaced almost simultaneously at gun shows and other places where people can go and buy bags of guns, bring them back in to sell them out of the trunk of their car. So we have people on the street that are trying to interact with people at risk. We are providing opportunities for education, for job training, for jobs, and for mental health and substance abuse among some of our young folks who are struggling out there. We have our people out every weekend, out during the week, trying to interact and interface with folks who may be in trouble of being shot or shooting somebody. And we'll continue doing that. But I will tell you in the end, as long as you can get a gun faster than a driver's license in Pennsylvania, we're going to have a hard time.
So does that mean we're moving forward with a thought maybe of the citywide gun violence emergency?
People have to define what a citywide gun violence state of emergency is. Because if it is asking law-abiding people not to leave their homes, I don't think we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that place. So we can't have kind of people that that are told that they have to stay home like a lockdown. It's not fair to the people who are not doing anything but going about their business, going to work, going to school. So I'm not one for these kinds of curfews, but I don't think we're there yet. So, and I hope we don't get there.
Thank you. And
you want an update on the
I can handle that. I could handle that, Mr. Mayor. About Friday, April 23rd, right after 4:30 p.m., what we know is that individual we now know is Ronald Peck Jr., a 25-year-old from Delaware, was in that area of 51st and Irving. Police responded and found him shot multiple times. On just last week, Friday the 7th, he had passed away of his injuries that had occurred on the 23rd. Right now, the homicide unit is taking the investigation over, obviously, from Southwest detectives. They're pulling video in this area and in subsequent areas. It's another investigation we need a lot of help on. We really don't know what we're looking at. We don't have any live witnesses, and detectives are moving very slowly, trying to find evidence at the crime scene that's going to lead us back to somebody.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Anna Orso with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on the domestic homicide numbers. How do police actually define a homicide that's attributed to domestic violence versus just an argument? Like if a person kills his or her intimate partner, is that automatically considered a domestic homicide?
The motives in the homicides are really based on interviews that we do through the investigation. So the relationship of the people involved as categorized by the FBI and the NIBRS programming that we use now. Brother, sister, could be domestic, brother, or boyfriend, girlfriend, vice versa, or husband, wife. So there could be lots of categories. If they cohabitate, if they're related to each other, we'll categorize them as some kind of domestic issue.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And just one more question for you, Inspector Venor. You mentioned the task force investigation that yielded the firearms. I thought I saw on the slide that there were also a couple of arrests related to that investigation. Were those VUFA arrests or what were they?
Yeah, so during the course of the gun violence task force, we have detectives assigned to it. They work alongside the ATF, along with the Attorney General's office. When we investigate these individuals, and that investigation could be through interviews, social media, lots of other avenues that we do, we know these individuals are in possession of illegal guns, search warrants are served. There were arrests in that case. A few of them were juveniles, so we're not going to release photos or their names, but there was at least one adult arrested in those cases.
And is there anything else you can say about whether those people had a relationship to each other or were connected to each other or how?
I don't know that. I don't have that information. Okay. I can get back to you with it if you need.
That's okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Last call for any further questions. Okay, seeing nothing else, that concludes today's briefing. Like we said earlier, we will post this briefing on our city Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube channels later this afternoon if you need it. And we will return in 2 weeks on May 26th for another update. Thanks so much.